So in this segment, we're going to be carrying on with our kind of look at Boris Johnson's nonsensical statements around the Northern Ireland Protocol. He's already admitted, if you watch the previous video, that the deal he negotiated was rubbish. But yeah, we move.
Of the
So just kind of, he's talking about the Northern Ireland Protocol bill for context here.
Friday Agreement. Now, the EU did not like that bill. They did not like it because it took away their control, and above all because it frustrated their key objective by keeping Northern Ireland in the single market for goods. And that made it much more difficult for the UK to diverge and to do things differently because of the strains that would place on the Union. And
that's nonsense. What he's arguing is the EU kind of didn't the EU kept kind of the protocol in place and made it as strict as they did, so the UK could not, the rest of, essentially Great Britain could not diverge from EU standards and do things our own way. Absolute nonsense. The protocol was built that if I think the UK did start deregulating, there would be more and more checks in the Irish Sea, and that would put pressure on the Union, yes, but that's pressure put on by Boris Johnson and the Westminster government, not pressure put on by the EU.
I can tell you that in all my conversations with our friends in the EU over the years, it was that idea of divergence, that whole sort of Singapore-on-Thames concept, whatever you may think of it. It was that idea of divergence that they feared, the UK actually taking advantage of Brexit freedoms so as to be more competitive. And so, in my view, they used the Northern Ireland problem as a way of keeping us more or less where they wanted.
That's garbage. I'll tell you, the reason why they were so strict on the protocol, and still are so strict, is because they don't want goods that are substandard getting into the single market via Northern Ireland. That's why it was set up like this. If the EU didn't want us to thrive, if the EU wanted to struggle, they wouldn't have signed the TCA. They wouldn't have given us the TCA, and it does benefit the EU because they export more goods to us. But the UK had no way of doing the checks. The UK had no reason to put on tariffs because it would have caused us further problems with the cost of living. So if the EU really wanted to do us in, they wouldn't have signed something like the TCA, for example.
So that their system, the European Court of Justice, and all the rest of it was still glomped on and in some important respects still in charge of part of the UK.
The idea that it's been crazy that the ECJ would have a say over goods moving within the EU single market for goods, it's just madness, right? They would have no vested interest in protecting that garbage.
I remember Angela Merkel actually coming up to me at I think it was a G20 summit, and saying, if you continue with this bill, it will be a Shakespearean tragedy. Well, she turned out to be right there. Though I leave it to you to work out which tragedy it was.
Now, I'm going to ask you, do you think that's something Angela Merkel would say? I'm not too familiar with the stuff she would say. But do you think she would say it could be a Shakespearean tragedy? Or do you think that's something Boris Johnson would say? It very much sounds like something Boris Johnson would say. But I think for us, it would be a nightmare. For the EU, it would be problematic, yes, because of, goods going in to the EU single market via Northern Ireland. It would be very problematic. And a trade war, no one really wins in a trade war. But I think for the UK, it would be a lot worse. The EU were ready to throw hands at that point, and the UK were not ready to defend them.
And so I was thrilled when in June that bill sailed through the House of Commons unamended. I was pleased when the present Prime Minister and his predecessor said that they would continue with it. And so when I look at the deal that we have now, I of course have mixed feelings. I'm conscious of where the political momentum is and people's deep desire just to get on. And this has got to be about the people of Northern Ireland, the 1.9 million people, their businesses and their lives. And given that we have got rid of the bill, I can see why so many people are attracted to accepting a compromise.
The bill hasn't been put on ice yet, but the Northern Ireland, the Windsor Framework, kind of the new version of the protocol, does say that the UK's Northern Ireland Protocol bill has to be put on ice, effectively killed. So it's not been killed yet. And I thought the whole point of the Northern Ireland Protocol bill was to get us a better deal from the EU. And he's achieved that. So the whole point of the bill is gone then. And, for Johnson to kind of argue that we would get an even better agreement if the bill passes makes no sense.
And I agree passionately with Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, for whom I have the highest regard, that the people of Northern Ireland need their assembly and they need their government. And it's not for me to advise Sir Geoffrey, but I hope that he can find a way of reconciling himself and his party to this outcome, which is the fact that we have, and getting back into Stormont.
But why have you been telling the DUP why have you been telling the DUP to resist the deal then? If you want them back in Stormont, surely you should tell them to accept the deal and take up their place in Stormont. Because I think some businesses are more happy with the current, we're happy with the protocol arrangements. They're even more happy now that there's chances of a green lane. Amongst other things, I think the medicines issues have been sorted out, or at least they're a lot better than they were under Johnson's terrible deal, which he admitted was terrible. So which businesses has he spoken to about their frustrations regarding the protocol? Because if it's about businesses, if it's about people, then they've got, fresh fruit on the shelves, whilst people in Great Britain don't. They have access to sell their goods or buy their goods from the entirety of the EU. People in GB don't, not without customs fees and other things. So, his argument has got to work for business, work for people in Northern Ireland is simply not true. It's got to work for the DUP. That's the problem. And the DUP are lunatics.
And I am conscious I'm not going to be thanked for saying this, but I think it's my job to do so. We must be clear about what is really going on here. This is not about the UK taking back control. And although there are easements, this is really a version of the solution that was being offered last year to Liz Truss when she was Foreign Secretary. This is the EU graciously unbending to allow us to do what we want in our own country, not by our laws, but by theirs. They're not scrapping hundreds of pages of EU regulations. They're passing EU law. They're passing new regulations to allow British goods to pass from one part of this country to another, still under EU law, but with what they hope will be lighter bureaucracy.
I mean, it will be like a bureaucracy, so it's a good thing. But given that you're the one who put Northern Ireland into the EU single market, this is kind of on for goods. Single market for goods. This is kind of on you, Chief. Let's be real here.
21 data points on the forms instead of 80 to be completed by trusted traders who can show the EU that they have certain assets and goods for sale in Northern Ireland, and to be prominently labelled not for EU among many other provisions and restrictions. Look, we've got to hope that it works and genuinely reduces frictions. I'm particularly concerned that goods going for processing and manufacturing in Northern Ireland from Great Britain, goods that are part of a supply chain, seem to be going through the red lane for firms above a certain size, which seems pretty crazy and not supportive of the UK internal market.
I mean, it's not the EU don't care about the UK's internal market, not really. But point being is, if you've got issues with the way the trusted trader scheme is being set up, it's still in a draft agreement. So you could lobby Rishi Sunak to tell him, like, look, why is it that firms above a certain size aren't being included in the agreement if you have specific issues with it? This is your chance, Chief, to get involved and actually do something positive rather than do something negative, which is something you normally do after you drank your cup of haterade in the morning because you're no longer Prime Minister anymore.
And what this will certainly not do is allow goods made in Northern Ireland to be made according to UK standards, unless they're also EU standards for sale in Northern Ireland. Or at least it is very, very unclear the extent to which that would be allowed.
I mean, I don't think it's that unclear. It's goods made in Northern Ireland would have to adhere to EU standards because those goods can be shipped into the EU single market without any checks on standards. So that's the key problem there. I think it's very clear what is going to happen. I don't know why you're so confused, Chief.
It's very unclear.
It's very clear.
For motor manufacturing and all the rest of it. The EU single market remains paramount. And in that sense, this deal helps to accomplish the key objective that I spoke of. And so it acts as a drag anchor on divergence.
You know, when he says it acts as a drag anchor on divergence. I mean, sure, you know, the idea that the UK could diverge, it's going to be a bit more difficult, I think, because it will make the green lane pointless and it will make the red lane a lot more difficult to navigate. But the whole point is it's built on your Northern Ireland Protocol agreement, and you know you're the one who touted it as being a great deal. You're the one who convinced the Conservative MPs, the majority of them, to vote for it. So you know this is kind of on you, dog, and I know he does take some responsibility towards the start of the video. If we just play that here, actually, because might as well have got a timestamp marked for it.
And it's all my fault. I fully accept responsibility. And
you know, but the thing is, you know, this is the only way to get stability. You know, you can't start saber rattling with the EU because you're going to get yourself into more instability, a trade war that we're going to lose. I've already explained why the UK would get hammered in a trade war. I can redo that video if people want me to, but the simple fact is, you know, that's not what you want. And clearly, Rishi Sunak is moving in a direction of being less antagonistic towards the EU and being more cooperative, which is a good thing in my opinion. But, you know, Johnson's arguments here about the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, this is him trying to scupper Rishi Sunak, trying to tank him and trying to mount a comeback. You know, we're seeing that with Liz Truss, with the low tax Tories. This is Johnson's attempt to kind of come back into the race to try and become Prime Minister. And, you know, I kind of want to bring you to the attention of this one. So someone called Lee Harris tweeted that Boris Johnson says he will find it very difficult to vote for the Windsor Framework. This is not about the UK taking back control. He says the government should have the guts to proceed with the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, no matter how much plaster came off the ceiling in Brussels. You know, what that means about the plaster, I have no idea. He says weird, nonsensical statements. But Johnson saying he'll find it very difficult to vote for Sunak's deal is just absolute nonsense. You know, this man's a moron, absolute moron. He's the one that's got us into this mess, you know, since 2016 really, when he decided, you know what, this is my chance to become Prime Minister of this country, and boy has he done a crap job. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Please watch part 1 of this if you haven't. That should have already gone up on the channel, and if you want me to put it into one big video, let me know and I can just do that. It'd be pretty easy. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.